What's going on, Godzirra Nation? This is Arghgodzirra, and welcome back to another installment of Arghgodzirra'S footy tipping competition, looking ahead to round 4 AFL action. Thank you for joining me as always. Now, before we can look at this week's upcoming games, it's time to turn back the clock and have a look at the outcomes of last weekend. Myself, I actually had a pretty good round this week considering the last couple of weeks I've had. I tipped 6 correct tips overall. However, I was outbeaten by 3 competitors that all tipped 7. Those were Brandon King, Snake Plays, and Project Zeta. Brandon King, 3 weeks in a row, tipping the most correct tips. This is the second week in a row for Snake Plays. First time we've seen Zeta up on the leaderboard. So overall, Brandon King is still leading the competition with 17 tips total, but is holding on to that lead by only 1 tip. It is up for grabs well and truly. This weekend could see a shift in the balance, but now that we have recapped last week's scores, it's time to lock in our tips for round 4 action. Round 4 kicks off with Thursday night football, Sydney hosting Melbourne at the SCG. Sydney notching up their first win last week against Carlton, who held on in a very impressive performance. Melbourne dropping the ball to Essendon, giving them their first win, and Melbourne still hunting for their first win, currently sitting 0-3. Having a look at it all up, I'm going to tip Sydney. I think coming back home, now that they've got a win, they're going to start rolling with that momentum. Isaac Heaney found a lot of the ball last week. Good to see him getting some midfield minutes and coming back into form. Lance Franklin, however, he's still very down on what he can pump out. I'm expecting him to go big, and especially coming this weekend, I think they can get it done against Melbourne. I think Lance Franklin can well and truly crack open that Melbourne defence, especially with Frost having a bit of a down game last week and getting exposed in the one-on-one contest. Melbourne could well and truly upset my tip here. They really could. They could shock the AFL world. But I think Sydney is a safe tip to start off my tips for round 4. Friday night, Collingwood host Western Bulldogs at the MCG. This is going to be a very good game. 2 teams running with some very good form. Last week we saw Collingwood fall to the reigning premiers in the grand final replay. I actually thought for a second Collingwood could get the job done. They fell to a very impressive Eagles outfit. The Bulldogs, however, we all saw what happened. The Gold Coast got the early jump, and the Gold Coast managed to knock off another team in back-to-back weeks. Who would have thought 3 rounds in, the Gold Coast actually could have potentially been 3-0, considering everybody, including myself, had them locked up for the wooden spoon by year's end. I feel here Collingwood are going to get the job done. I just feel Western Bulldogs in the last 2 weeks, if you go back and have a look, they have left everything to attempt to chase from the final quarter. They've allowed teams to get an early jump, and they've been playing catch up. I made a comment last week to a friend saying if the Bulldogs did that against some of the more elite teams of the competition, they would have no chance. I've got to back up that statement by tipping Collingwood here. If they give Collingwood a 6-7 goal buffer, there is no way I see Collingwood giving that up. I mean, we all know what happened in the 2018 grand final, but I think they've learnt from that. They're a better side since then. And out of the 2 teams, even though Western Bulldogs might have an extra win on the board, I do think Collingwood is the better team out of the 2. Hence my tip for Collingwood to win on Friday night. Saturday afternoon kicks off with what I think is going to be game of the round. Geelong hosting GWS at the GMHBA Stadium. I'm going to tip an upset here. Geelong have probably been in the first 3 rounds the premier club of the competition. Undefeated, very good use of the football. They have put on an absolute clinic in the first 3 rounds. However, they have not come up against GWS yet. And I think GWS are a sneaky chance for the premiership after seeing what they've dealt out the first 3 rounds. I think GWS are going to travel down to Geelong and give them their first loss for the 2019 season. It might be a bit outrageous to some, I know, and I know a lot of you will probably back Geelong because it is at home and they've been playing some good football. I just think you've got to take some left field selections this year. And GWS, they've shown a lot. I still think their best is yet to come. They still have some pivotal players to come back in. I think Shane Mumford back in the ruck will help them a lot. Lockie Whitfield is shaping up to be one of the best players of the competition in this season without a shadow of a doubt. Josh Kelly back in, starting to get a feel for the ball. Callan Ward still yet to come back. Some other youngsters due to come back as well. Their upside is absolutely huge. I am backing GWS to upset Geelong to kick things off Saturday afternoon. We move on over to the MCG where Essendon is hosting Brisbane. And although Essendon found a little bit of form last week, thank you umpires, I'm still going to back Brisbane here. At the moment, without a shadow of a doubt, they are the most exciting team in the AFL to watch. They have taken down the likes of West Coast and Port Adelaide, so it's not like they've played some of the lesser teams and gotten easy wins. They've had to fight for their wins. They are well deservingly sitting in second place, I think, by the end of this round. Considering them and Geelong are the only two undefeated teams, Brisbane is going to be on top of the ladder and still undefeated after 4 rounds. Huge call, I know, but I just think we saw Brisbane travel down here in round 2 and get the job done. I feel they do it again. You could argue now that Essendon have momentum that they could swing it and bring it their way. I just feel Brisbane overall have shown more in the first 3 rounds than Essendon have. And Brisbane, in my tipping anyway, will get the job done comfortably on Saturday afternoon. Later on that night, we have Port Adelaide playing host to Richmond at Adelaide Oval. Richmond in all sorts. If we weren't already hurting because of Rance and Jack Riewoldt out of the team, Trent Cotchin is facing a possible 1 to 3 week stint with a hamstring. Dustin Martin obviously serving a week on suspension as well. Jaden Short from defence out for 8 weeks too. However, they say when one door closes, another door opens. We saw the debut of Sydney Stack last week. Absolutely huge debut for the youngster. Went undrafted, comes out last weekend, had close to 20 touches, kicked his first goal, laid a ton of tackles. Even though it's upsetting to see some players go down due to injury, it is great to see some youngsters coming up and getting a look at what the future looks like down at Tigerland. Not just for Richmond in that retrospect either, but for any club that has some of their bigger names out and they're able to bring in some youth just to show the fans what the future is going to look like. I think that is a great prospect to look forward to. However, looking back at the game, I think with Richmond having those pivotal outs, I don't see where the avenues are going to come from with Richmond trying to get a win here, and Port Adelaide should get it done quite comfortably. It's upsetting to say that I've tipped against my team 2 weeks in a row. I just feel the travel with those outs named, I think it's going to be a bit of a task for Richmond. Port Adelaide for me, Saturday afternoon. We then head on over to Marvel Stadium, where North Melbourne is playing host to Adelaide. Adelaide have 1 win up their sleeve for the season. North Melbourne still hunting for their first win. And even though North Melbourne probably have their backs to the wall and are in some dire straits at the moment, I feel this is the week they get their first win. I am tipping North Melbourne to get it done against Adelaide. I'm still finding it hard to get a read on Adelaide from their start that they've had and see whereabouts they're going to finish now. I had them finishing within the top 5, but at the moment they're not playing like a top 8 team. They just drop off and they're thereabout. North Melbourne I'm pretty sure slotting into the 8th spot. Same thing with them. It's hard to get a read on them, but I just feel even though North Melbourne have lost their first 3 games, in their last 2 weeks they've shown to me a little bit more than what Adelaide have, and that's why I feel North Melbourne here with their backs against the wall. They've got nothing to lose. They'll come out firing, and I think they'll notch up their first win for the 2019 season. Saturday night rounds out with the Western Derby. We have West Coast Eagles hosting Fremantle in what is going to be a good hit out, considering Fremantle have been playing some very good football. However, West Coast have found a lot of form the last couple of weeks. They are coming back to the form that we saw them take down the flag with last year. And I feel with no Nat Fyfe running around for Fremantle for a couple of weeks, West Coast will get the job done comfortably here. Their recent form has shown that they are more than capable of going back-to-back this season for the premiership. I'm not doubting they can't. They are one of the premier teams of the competition. They're finally recapturing some form, as I've already mentioned, and I think they will get the job done quite comfortably. 30-plus points against Fremantle to round out Saturday night and notch up another derby win for the Eagles. Sunday afternoon kicks off with the Gold Coast hosting Carlton at Metricon Stadium. A lot of people are already rubbishing this game, saying it's going to be the worst game of the round. However, when you take into account that the Gold Coast Suns, tipped by almost 100% of people coming into this season as the Wooden Spooners, they could have potentially started this year 3-0, and a lot of people would not have picked that. Carlton, however, they've been thereabouts the first 3 rounds. They haven't been blown out of the water. They have held on against every single team that they have come up against. They've played Richmond here in Melbourne, they've played Port Adelaide in Adelaide, and they've played Sydney over here. 3 big clubs, and to hold on against them, considering their circumstances, absolutely well done. On the other retrospective things, you have a look at the Gold Coast, and the Gold Coast so far have only had to take on St Kilda, in which they lost by a point. In round 2, the Gold Coast took on Fremantle, and then in round 3, we saw the Gold Coast take on the Bulldogs. Now, not knocking the 3 teams that the Gold Coast have played so far, but Carlton have definitely played tougher competition than the Gold Coast. And that is why I feel this week could be the week that Carlton get up and win their first game for the 2019 season. I am tipping Carlton to travel up to the Gold Coast this weekend and bring home their first win for the season. And round 4 wraps up with St Kilda hosting Hawthorn at Marvel Stadium. Both teams have shown a lot this season. More so St Kilda. I think St Kilda, along with the likes of the Gold Coast and Brisbane, Fremantle, those types of teams, they've been the teams that have been really impressive to watch. A lot of people starting to generate a lot of buzz down at St Kilda. The fans are happy. People that just love watching AFL are happy to see St Kilda starting to have a good run as well. Let's go out on a big note to round up our round 4 tips. And I'm going to do it with a big call. I'm going to back St Kilda to knock off Hawthorn to finish Sunday night. We've got to start rolling the dice with this tipping competition. The tips have been going up and down, and teams that should be blown out of the water are actually coming out on top. So we got to start choosing some unique tips, and I honestly do feel St Kilda can put the sword to Hawthorn. Their speed this season has been absolutely incredible, and I think on the rebound they are the quicker team, and they could really put the sword to Hawthorn. So I'm selecting St Kilda to wrap up my tips for round 4. Having a quick recap at who I've tipped for this round, I've gone with Sydney, Collingwood, GWS, Brisbane, Port Adelaide, North Melbourne, West Coast, Carlton, and St Kilda. Don't forget to leave your tips in the comment section down below, or alternatively you can hit me up on social media like some of you have been. I want to thank you all for getting behind this initiative. We have a lot more people playing this year than we had last year, some of which, as I said, have been hitting me up on social media as well as the comment section. So I'm very happy that not only we've, increased our input with this initiative, but we've actually got people using the social media links that I'm dropping as well, which is absolutely fantastic. I cannot thank you guys enough yet again for all that support. Thank you for joining me for another round of AFL tipping. I hope your teams go well this weekend. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.